when I look at it from a 1Password point of view, what we're trying to do is make it easy for people and businesses to stay safe at a human level. So again, I want to help humans at work and at home.
Welcome to a new episode of All Aboard, the show where we have real conversations with IT and security practitioners. No fluff, no talking points, just straight talk from experts and advice for tackling the toughest problems facing cloud-forward companies today. I'm your host, Alex Bovee, CEO and co-founder of Conductor One. Welcome to another episode of the All Aboard podcast. I'm super excited about this one. This week, I talked to Jeff Shiner, CEO of 1Password, all about how 1Password has grown from a niche consumer product into the leading online password and authentication security provider. Jeff was instrumental in moving 1Password from a pure consumer play to the behemoth they are now in the B2B space. Inasmuch, he has some great insights to share about scaling tech companies and how to do it without losing sight of your fundamental and foundational goals. We talked about listening to customers and how this has guided 1Password's growth and how it's really focused them on making their product, and I quote, Angry Birds easy. Lastly, we explore what he sees as the future of personal online safety. Let's jump right in. Jeff, thank you for joining me today. I appreciate you being on the podcast. I've just been super excited about this episode, actually, because I love what you guys are doing at 1Password. I have a tremendous amount of respect for the company, both in terms of how you built that business, built your customer base, built your technology. I think there's a lot of unique stuff there. And I'm just really excited to jump into it with you and talk about all of the above.
Well, I appreciate being here.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, maybe to start, I do want to talk about the technology and the use cases around passwords, but kind of, CEO to CEO, business person to business person. I love talking about the business and understanding that. And I think one of the things that is really fascinating about 1Password is it's one of these stories of like a 20-year overnight success, I think is kind of the joke where, it's like a lot of people look at 1Password, it's like ubiquitous now in terms of password management. Everyone knows it. I would argue it's almost it's a well-known brand, even within like the home. I could probably ask my mom about 1Password. She would know what the company was. And I think that's just really rarefied air. But can you tell me a little bit about what that journey was like? When were you guys founded? What did maybe some of the early days look like? When did you join the company? And how did the company sort of transition from that point?
Yeah, I mean, 1Password, we're 18 years old now. So you're right. It's absolutely one of those 20-year overnight successes that, seem to take that long in general. And the two founding families, so Dave, Sarah, Rustam, and Natalia are the ones that started it. And for the first, I would say 10 years, we were consumer only. And that was, in fact, in the early years, I would say even just largely Apple only. And, the goal was really to, keep people safe online, right? That's always been that goal. That continues to be the goal. We've grown the product by listening to our customers. And, when I think of it from almost day one, certainly when I joined, so I joined about 11 years ago. And I joined, because Dave and Rustam in particular, I think the company was 20 people at the time, which, felt big at the time. We're 1,100 now, so maybe doesn't feel so big anymore. But, it was 20 people at the time. And Dave and Rustam in particular, who were really leading the company, and then Sarah was leading the customer support and finance side. It was like, they want to build and innovate. They don't necessarily want to lead a company or lead from a people point of view. Now, I had been actually Dave's team lead back at IBM in the very late 90s when we were building e-commerce, and I'd lived up the street from him at the time. So we'd both moved kind of into different jobs and into different positions. But that's why he reached back out to me, because again, I had the engineering background. I'm a tech dev by trade, but I'd also grown to where I was leading a business unit out at a company called Rosetta in the US and had 400 people for me. So I had a bit of both the tech side, so I could come actually help build the product and also some of the leadership. What I started to notice, I would say the major change that I made, probably the most significant change I made, is around 2013. I saw a change. And the change was, again, driven by our customers and in particular businesses. So in around 2012, 2013, businesses would sometimes buy copies of 1Password for all their employees for Christmas to keep their employees safe. But 2013 going into 2014, we started to see businesses buying copies of 1Password for their employees to keep the business safe. And that was the change that we really started to see. And so in the middle of 2014, I think I was actually at Collision Uranus North, one of the conferences I was at, and everything sort of came together, and I said, we have to build a business offering. And in order to build a business offering, we also had to build a SaaS solution, because we didn't have a SaaS solution, right? It was sync through Dropbox or iCloud or things like that. So that took us a couple of years, as you might imagine. And in 2016 is when we launched 1Password for Business. And that really was a big change, both because the SaaS offering really allowed us to do, whether it was for families or for businesses, some of the things we needed to do, like teams and shared vaults and things like that. And obviously on the business side, led us down the path of the admin capabilities that you need, which you can't have if you don't have a SaaS offering. So I would say that was the biggest change. And then the second biggest change was really around, well, I'd say the middle of 2019. It all came together by the end of 2019, but was when we decided to go for our first round of funding.
Yeah.
Yeah, the reason we did that was an interesting one. So, we've been profitable from day one. That's just how we've run our business. And, when you're bootstrapped, if you're going to be bootstrapped for 14 years, you got to be profitable, or you know somebody who's won the lottery, I guess. But, that's how we ran our business. We didn't need the money. And VCs had come to us for years. But it was like, hey, we don't need the money. We don't know what we do with it. But we were still half engineers. I think at the end of 2019, we ended the year with like 187 people. I think it was something, we'll call it 180 people. Half engineers, half customer support. Build a good product, support the heck out of our customers. That's what we try and do today. But we needed more. And when I say more, we needed more from what I call growing and growing up. So the growing side was just, again, continuing to get bigger, which at 180 people, you start to have some of the problems. We had just, gotten our first managers and things like that as we tried to get organized into teams. But we also needed some more sophistication in our company. We needed to start doing proper financing and finance accounting and things like that. We needed a go-to-market team, because we were selling to more and more and bigger businesses, and they were coming to us with MSAs and that. So we needed help on the legal side. We wanted to organize our marketing and have a marketing team. We wanted to have a true product team. And of course, we wanted to continue to grow customer support and development. And so what I said was, like, I don't know how to hire these people. I don't know how to hire a world-class CFO, a world-class, chief revenue officer, head of product and things like that. When we were such a private company, the top folks weren't willing to come to us for the most part at that time, because they didn't know who we were. They didn't know if we were profitable. We were a little too private. And so the A round with Excel was really, that, hey, here is us sort of moment that, raised money. We could use that for Courage Capital if there were some acquisitions we wanted to do. And we've done a couple since. But also it was just really an indication of, we are actually a successful company, along with, hopefully a brand that people love.
Yeah, that makes sense. Your story reminds me a lot, actually, of Grammarly, the company that they did very something similar, like bootstrapped her for a while, took on that growth capital towards the end. But so many great things in there. I actually want to scratch just for a second at the customer success piece of it, because that's something that it resonates so deeply with me as well, and how we build our company. And I think that just focusing on making customers happy, successful from day one, and really like inculcating that in the business is it can set the trajectory for success. And I'm really curious, actually, just to spend a second on that. Was that a core value and principle in 1Password? And how did you inculcate that value into the company? And then how did you make sure that as you grow to 1,200 people, like you keep that value?
Yeah, and it 100% was. So again, I think one of my favorite stories from Dave, who's one of our founders, he'd worked for IBM for a number of years. And one of the reasons he left IBM, again, I left IBM, and I still say I have blue in my blood. I loved my time there. But, I remember Dave saying, like, one of the reasons, he was building e-commerce, which is something that everybody uses, but just given sort of the nature of IBM, he wasn't close enough to see the people who were using it, or to hear from them, or to understand what they liked about it and didn't like about it. And that was, that was sort of food for the soul for him. He needed that. So, when he left, and he did actually consulting for a while on that, but eventually, with Rustam started what would become 1Password. Part of it was just that enthusiasm and joy of being able to talk to customers. What did they like? What didn't they like? It doesn't mean we're going to add everything that they like or remove everything they don't like, but they guide us. Again, even going into B2B wasn't because, hey, here's everybody else is going into B2B, let's do it. It was because our customers were telling us, like, we're trying to use this for our business, but man, like, you're just missing all of the business capabilities we need, right? And so there's been a number of things that we've done as we continue to grow, and they change endlessly, but to try and keep us close to the customer. I think my favorite thing, and it lasted up until probably a couple of years ago, is we used to have what we called CS Monday. So obviously we've got a huge customer, maybe not obvious, but we've got a customer support team of well over 200 people. And that team is, something we're, very proud to have in-house, and something that's very near and dear to us. But we used to have what we called CS Mondays, or customer support Mondays, where everybody in the company, regardless of role, from, founders and myself to every single, whether you're developer, design, doesn't matter, would help customers. And that could take a number of different forms. You could either help them directly in the support tickets. You could help them in the forums. You could help them in, Hacker News, wherever they were. We could just help the customers, and it did two things. One, obviously, it helped our customers, and at times it's really nice, to hear from the dev or stuff like that. That like, here's the more in-depth reason as to why this works this way, or why this doesn't, behave maybe how you'd expect. But it also, like, you watch a dev, and a dev, like, again, I say this as a dev, like, you get excited by the new things you can build, and you're off building it and stuff like that. Your customer support team comes to you and says, hey, we've got a number of customers complaining about X. You're like, yeah. Here's how to tell them to work around it. But then when you're the dev, and it's like, here's the third customer that you're helping, you're like, darn it, I'm going to go fix this. Like, it just gives you that boost, because and that's precious. And so we haven't been able to do that all the way up to 11, growing on to 1,200 people, because again, as things get more sophisticated, more complicated, our customer support team, for one, is so skilled that it takes quite a few weeks of training just to become one. And I wouldn't want to just throw in another few hundred untrained of my employees into that and have them misguiding our customers. But we still do many of those sorts of things, and a big part of it is now making sure that our customer support teams and our customer success, and customer support is more on the end user, customer success is more on the helping the B2B businesses, that they are given a front seat at the table of all of the projects we're building, both to help guide what projects we should build. I want to build what the customers want and what the customers find valuable. And then I want to also understand where are we struggling, right? And it's been really nice. I don't think she'll mind me mentioning this, but it's been really nice because, Sarah, one of our founders, has actually taken over the role of the lead of customer support again. So that's pretty exciting, because that makes it super, super simple to keep the original idea and purpose and love of customers right to this day.
Yeah, I love that story. That's great. The CS Mondays thing is that's a great idea. We've done different things, but I might copy you guys. So what I love about this is, obviously it worked. Obviously it's working. 1Password's on a tear. You took the money. I saw a press release. You hit the 250 million ARR milestone. B2B, roughly 2/3 of that revenue, growing tremendously. I think 50% year over year was the number that I saw. So clearly you're doing something right, and this is working. So congratulations on that note. One of the other things that you touched on for a second was Courage Capital, the opportunity to buy additional businesses in the space. I have noticed 1Password has become somewhat acquisitive in the space. I think you guys acquired a secrets management company and maybe done a few other acquisitions as well along the way. But I'm really kind of curious, whenever technology companies do that, other technology folks like myself, you like look at those acquisitions and you try to stitch together like, oh, what's 1Password doing in the space? Where are they going? Where are they taking it? And where are they taking their business and where they think the market's going? Can you share anything about where you want to take 1Password in the future? What is the vision for the company, and kind of how do you want to continue to protect customers on the internet?
Yeah, and it's kind of nice because in almost every respect, what we're trying to do is what we've always tried to do, and that is to keep people and now businesses as well, but safe online. And so a lot of times I get asked to compare sort of B2C versus B2B and how I think about them, and that will help you understand sort of where we're going as a product and as a company. And when we look at the ARR numbers, we look at it from a financial point of view, and B2B is, now even probably more than 2/3 of our business. That is where the business growth comes from a revenue point of view. And then they say, well, what does that mean for the consumer? And so there's two things that I think are really, really important. One, we can grow the business because what we do is we protect humans. And I would like to think of myself as a human. I mean, in this day and age, it's kind of hard to tell, I guess, but I would like to think of myself as a human when I'm at work and when I'm not at work. And that's why we've been successful at businesses, because at the end of the day, geez, now I certainly sound like an IBM. Now at the end of the day, it's employees that work there, and the employees are human, and they have the same problems at work as we do at home. And now in 2023, that's even more mixed, right? Because I might be on, a managed computer, but a personal phone in my case, right? And, in the middle of the day, I might have to go and in the middle of a work day, I might have to go and pay a bill, or I might go on my phone at lunch and do a bunch of personal stuff. And I guarantee you in the evenings when I may be doing personal stuff, I'm going to go and check Slack, or I'm going to go on to Salesforce or things like that. And so life has just mixed, both from a location point of view, from a device point of view, from now an app's point of view. And that's the other thing that I think has really changed in sort of the business/home environment. I say somewhat jokingly, software used to be sold on golf courses. Right. And you look, 15, 20 years ago, there was a salesperson at one company, an exec at the other company. They'd get together and the salesperson would sell, it wasn't quite that simple, but the salesperson would sell to the exec. They would bring it in. They would bring it, to their IT department, who would go and implement it with the help of a number of consultants, put it behind their SSO and provision it out. And that's what you used. Right. Now, how does software get into businesses? Oh, my friend tried Figma and said it was awesome. I'm going to try Figma. 3 Fig Jams later, everybody in the company is using Figma, right? That's how software is brought into companies. And, it reminds me of a story at 1Password where when Julian started, he and his team brought in Monday.com because that's what they had used, at Julian's last company. And then Jeannie, who's my CFO, her team started to use it. And then, it was like 6 months later, Jeannie says to me, man, like, we're spending a lot of money on Monday and I'm getting all of these receipts. And it's like, how many people at our company are using it? Well, it turns out like 70% of the company's using it because it just sort of, I'll say, spread virally within the company. And so then what did we do? Then we said, okay, well, let's get an enterprise license so that we can save money on a per person basis. We can also avoid, having, 700 people send in receipts. And now we can put it, behind our SSO. We use, Okta 1Password as our SSO. So again, when I look at it from a 1Password point of view, what we're trying to do is make it easy for people and businesses to stay safe at a human level. So again, I want to help humans at work and at home. That's what I want to help. And so some of the problems now, what we're seeing is expanding that problem. And that's adding to the direction we're going and the sorts of things that we're trying to build and purchase. And so it's the same end goal of helping people. It's just, we've kind of realized that people are the same at work and at home.
Yeah, it was really mind-blowing revelation. I mean, to poke at that and scratch at that for a second, though, you're obviously resource constrained. You guys have a war chest of cash. You've got a great team, big team, but there is a resource allocation question to this. Like, how do you think about deploying folks to supporting like the consumer business versus the business use case, or is it truly even within the company like a single spectrum of capabilities and the product experiences are the same? And I guess that I'm a little bit trying to understand, like, how do you operationalize at the company level the allocation of people to helping folks at the different part of that journey? Because at some level, some people who are using, sort of 1Password on a personal level, they might bring it into the business, but they also might not. And so it's different capabilities. And maybe I'm not articulating the question well. Hopefully,
No, I think I get where you're going. You can tell me if I got it after I answered it. If I
sure,
answered the question
fair enough.
And I would say that how we allocate is very different by org. So if I look at it, probably the easiest example is our go-to-market org, right? Our sales team, they're B2B focused, right?
Yeah.
There's not a lot of consumers coming and saying, I'd like an MSA. Please don't.
I want to redline your MSA. Okay.
Yes. Marketing, I would say is shifted towards B2B, right?
Yep.
Again, when we look at it from that perspective, when we look at engineering, for instance, I would say shifted towards B2C. Now, the interesting thing about engineering is I don't look at that as much as B2C versus B2B. I look at that. Now, there's the admin side. The admin side's clearly more B2B than B2C. Families still need it, but more B2B. But the bulk of what we do from a product point of view is really focused on the end user. And so I don't consider that, again, that's me as a person at work and at home. And that's where, so for instance, making things easier. I call things, like, my goal is what I call Angry Birds easy. So if you think of Angry Birds, like level 1, 1,000,000 birds, a stick of 3 houses, right? By the end of, you can't fail it. By the end of level 1, you understand the game, right? And that we need to make 1Password Angry Birds easy, especially for new users, so that they can just understand how to use it. They can understand the value. They get that aha moment. Because once they do, then they start gaining value. And let's be honest, for most people, that value quickly shifts from security to convenience, right? That's they know we're keeping them safe, but they really just like the convenience we provide. And to me, that's the goal. So when I think of it from an engineering and even a product perspective, so much of that is just focused on the end user, regardless as to whether they're at work, at home. And then there's a small part, which is maybe end user, which is more specific B2C versus B2B. But that's a pretty small, that's more like very specific features. But the bulk of it is really just, again, making the human experience easier. And that doesn't really differentiate. Now, the other thing that's kind of interesting for us is I firmly believe our success in business and our success long-term will be predicated on humans loving the 1Password experience. And we hear that a lot today, and it's heartwarming, but I just, one of the biggest things I sometimes get asked, like, what am I afraid of? And I'm afraid of 2 things. One, I'm afraid of not moving at the speed of technology, right? That's a technology company always has to move at the speed of technology, especially being out front. That can be, that can sometimes be almost more challenging out front, than saying there's the goal, I got to go and run. And the second thing I'm afraid of is that, like, at some point we'll take for granted the people who say, I love 1Password. Like that advocate, that's what makes us successful. And all of the other things I'm doing are important, but just, it can't just be, that's a good app. It has to be, I love this app. It makes my life easier. And if we do that, people will use us. They'll bring us into work. And to your point, not everyone will be successful in converting their company. But a lot of times a company, when they're looking for a password manager, will just pull their people and what are their folks using, and we'll come out on top every time.
I love it. That's some powerful first principles thinking. So I really appreciate that. It's a great segue, actually, because I'd love to switch a little bit from kind of the business aspect of it to actually those experiences. And one of the experiences, obviously, that 1Password talks about, and I think it's been like a pretty big trend in the security community in general over the last 4 to 5 years, is this idea of like killing passwords. So I'm curious, how do you, in the world where 1Password obviously is a credential manager at some level, how do you view that trend of killing the password? What does that actually mean for your business? Is that is that real? Is that a pipe dream? Like, can we get to that world? And sort of what role does your technology play in that?
Yeah, I think we can get there. Like, is it going to take us years and years? It just will. That's just the reality, right? I mean, it's,
For sure.
people have been trying to kill passwords for many decades, but I do think that there's a real opportunity to do that. And here's why I think this time is different. Because you always have to explain why this time is different from the last 10 times that it didn't work. And there's this new thing called passkeys, right? And passkeys is the passwordless solution that is going to enable people to both securely and conveniently replace a password. Those are the two that I think were necessary. Is can it be secure and convenient, because those are often at odds. So there's an alliance called the FIDO Alliance, and the name's not tremendously important, but this is the alliance of people that have been working on passkeys for years now. And, we're on the board of the FIDO Alliance. And I hate to say more importantly than us, but more importantly than us, Apple, Google, Microsoft are on the board of the FIDO Alliance, along with, Okta and others. And so it's those players that can influence billions of people and will influence billions of people. And they have supported it. So now iPhone and Windows devices and Android devices, at least the latest versions of the OS are all supporting passkeys. Google rolled out passkeys 6 months ago or so, probably a touch more than that. Apple's been rolling it out. Amazon, for instance, supports passkeys. PayPal and others. We actually have if you go to passkey directory, so passkey.directory, you can see a list of sites that support passkeys, and it's growing because of that support. And because of the technology that's involved, and because of where we're at now with the devices, that's allowed us to support passkeys. So last year you talked about acquisitions. Last year we actually bought a company called Passage, which was one of the leaders in passkeys and passkey technology, and that's a part of 1Password as well. And that was to further accelerate our leadership in that space. But what makes a passkey exciting? What it does is it sort of extends from an end user perspective. It extends an experience we're pretty familiar with today. So if you go on your phone, if you put, an app on your phone, let's say Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it, right? The first time you have to log in. So you put in your password, your username and password, and now you're logged in. Well, what happens the next time you go to Twitter on your phone? It's going to use your biometrics of your device to, in effect, unlock Twitter. Now, Twitter doesn't get your biometrics, and all of that stays on your device. But that's the user experience that now is just across all of your devices. I don't think people could live with their phones anymore if they had to use the old-fashioned ways. And so, if we think of that experience, what a passkey does is extends that experience to your very first usage. So when you go to sign in or sign up for a device, instead of choosing a password, you will, on that particular device, generate a passkey by using the biometrics of your device. Your end user experience will be the same. Use it. Underneath the covers, for those who are familiar with public-private key technology, there's a public and private key pair that's created. And that way, what's important from a security perspective is that the public key can be sent to, let's say Twitter in this case. You retain the private key on your device in 1Password, and that way, even if that company were to be breached, or there is a phishing attack where you were given to a fake site, they're getting the public key. They're not getting something that is of use. So there's a security benefit, but then there's a convenience benefit. Now, what role does 1Password play? And I think there's to me at least two main roles that 1Password plays. The one role is the role we always play, and that is, we're here to keep all of your most sensitive information both secure and available. So whether you're going from device to device, you're going from your iPhone to your iPad to your Windows machine to your Android, tablet, whatever, you need that key there. Otherwise, you're going to have to create new keys on different devices, and it starts to become, painful like it always is. So again, part of what passkeys allow is that movement, and so you can store it in 1Password. Now it's always available and always with you. So that's one real benefit. But I think that, to me, the more exciting benefit is where we are in the world is a world of all sorts of different types of authentication today. And so if you think of it, in a given day, you may log in with the username and password. You may log in with an SSO, again, like an Okta. You may log in with a social SSO, like a sign in with Facebook or sign in with Google. You might have these silly little, we're sending some 6-digit code to your phone things. And now we're going to have passkeys. And so all of these things, like, and I like to sit there and say, like, people don't wake up in the morning and go, how would I like to authenticate today? Right? They're just like, what task am I trying to do? Am I trying to pay a bill? Am I trying to log into work? So on and so forth. And so again, 1Password, we can take all of that and so we're going to store Salesforce and your bank and Twitter and all of these in 1Password. And if you're signing in with your username and password, we'll fill that in. If you're signing in with a passkey, we'll provide you the passkey. If you're signing in with your SSO, we'll redirect you to your SSO. If you're signing in with a Google, and so we're, regardless of that approach, we're going to help you through it. We're going to, again, make it easy for you to navigate that world of signing in.
That makes sense. And you unify that user experience. So one thing you touched on, but I want to go a little bit deeper on it, is the platform support. So getting folks like Apple, Google, Microsoft really kind of bought in on FIDO technology and the protocols was essential to the adoption of passkeys. But we didn't really talk about why. And I think one of the interesting things about technology adoption is, there's like two challenges I've seen generally around like shifts in big tech. One is like user experience changes. If someone is required to make a user experience change, it just can take a long time. And then the second, and it tends to be the more nefarious one, is the actual kind of product technology adoption lifecycle maturity curve, whether that's rolling out new laptops at your company so that you can use some new Face ID that's on the laptops, or whatever the case might be. There's just like a technology adoption or platform adoption lifecycle. Can you talk about the role the big tech companies play in passkeys, and why is it so important to have folks like Apple, Google, Microsoft really like bought in and really aligned to that vision?
Yeah, I think there's two reasons that they're needed. One is purely technology. We need their devices to support passkeys. So, in particular, you get into the Windows machines and the iPhones and iPads and Macs and stuff like that, and the Android devices. We just, from a technical perspective, their devices have to support it. So that's an obvious reason. I think the other reason is one of mass adoption. And, if we look at something like the biometrics on the devices, why has it been adopted so quickly? It's been adopted so quickly, not because it's more secure and maybe even some people will argue it is or it isn't. To me, it's certainly more secure than the old 4-digit PIN, but it's just convenient.
Yeah,
it's just convenient, right? And pretty ubiquitous now. And so I think that experience has been one that's been tremendously beneficial. But I think when we look at it in terms of now with taking that extra step into passkeys, we need the Apples, the Googles, the Microsofts to tell the world that this is here, right? Because their voice, by Google sitting there and supporting passkeys on Gmail, and I don't know yet. I haven't checked to see if it's by default when you create a new one, but at some point, if it's not already, it'll be default, for a new one, I'm sure. Like that's just telling the world this is here. When they then are going to look to 1Password to sit there and say yes, but is it safe? Right? Like that's going to be a key role that we need to play, is to sit there and say like, yeah, like we're supporting it. We're rolling it out for 1Password itself, so that instead of your account password, you can use, a passkey. Like how awesome is that? And so they're going to look at us and trust us to make sure it's safe. They're going to look at, the Apples and the Googles and that and say, okay, like why are they doing it? Because it's convenient. I think the third part to me is the interesting one. Why will businesses care? Like, why will businesses go that step and offer it? And this is where I'm going to rely a little bit on my e-commerce background, because I spent many years at IBM doing the e-commerce thing from late 98 through 2006. So some fun e-commerce years in there. And when I started, it was what I call a CTO sale. And so when we were selling e-commerce at the beginning, it was like you go to a company, they needed a website, they weren't sure why, but everybody was doing it, right? And that was, that was 99, right? And even 2000 up until the boom. But come 2003, 2004, then all of a sudden the CMO started to say, I need to have control of it. Now people weren't actually shopping online, but they were browsing, they were making purchasing and brand decisions. And so all of a sudden the CMO said, hey, like this has a brand implication, this has real revenue implication. And it changed from sort of a cost play into a revenue play. When I look at the same with passkeys, today people talk a lot about the security benefits. So I'll use Home Depot, one of my favorite stores. And, today Home Depot's got, I assume, millions of customers, which means they have passwords for millions of customers, which means they have to protect passwords for millions of customers. It means they're a target because they got passwords, all of those things. It's there's a CISO problem, right? As I would say. And so when we come with passkeys and we can say, hey, look at passage from 1Password. You want to add passkeys to your site with just a few lines of code. I call it like the Stripe of passkeys. With a few lines of code, you can offer a passkey experience to your customers. And now, you won't have these passwords and that you have to store and protect. But I think the more compelling side of it to me is if I go to the CMO at Home Depot, that CMO is going to sit there and say, do you know how many abandoned carts I have because somebody came back and forgot their password? Or do you know how many people I lose at sign up because page 4 is please choose a password and it's got to be 12 characters and it's got to have a hyphen and 3 numbers, and like that's such a friction, in the process. And we can remove that with passkeys. Now it's like, would you like to sign up? Please use your finger or your face, right? Like and it's not us storing that; it's your device storing it. I would never want to store the biometrics. Like it's the standard device storing it, and we're generating the private public key pair behind that. So now I've got the CISO who will be thrilled and the CMO who's thrilled. That means a business is thrilled. So that's the exciting part to me.
And users end up having a better experience and they're more secure. It's like the win-win-wins. It's rare, but if you could find them, holy cow, that's amazing. You talked for a second about, you mentioned the word trust. And actually you also talked a little bit about how even if you think about like the corporate boundary of Home Depot, they have tons of passwords and credentials for tons of users, and that kind of makes them a target. I think one of the interesting things about 1Password that you might not know if you just kind of go on 1Password and you sign up for the website and get an account is you guys really did innovate and do some different things technically at an architecture level to make sure to really change how you'd actually secure the credentials that you manage within the SaaS application for users. Can you talk a little bit about, and I don't know if you follow exactly the trust no one architectural principle, but that's kind of the way that I've thought about the way that you guys have built your technology. Can you talk a little bit about some of those technical principles? Were those intentional or were those happy mistakes? And maybe just talk a little bit about that, because I think it really has differentiated you guys in terms of just seeing some of the things that have happened to other password managers out in the space. You've really been able to avoid that. And that's amazing. If that was strategic when you guys started the company back in 2005, maybe that wasn't a first principle decision. I'm dying to know the story.
Yeah, I would say it was very it was a very principled decision of 2014. So okay. In 2014, when I said, hey, we're going to go B2B, that's when we needed to build a SaaS app, right? That's when we were going to store and hold people's items, their most important sensitive information. And so there is a selfish and a non-selfish reason we made the decision. So we made the decision that, okay, let's take a slight step back. What's the risk, right? The risk is, I would say all password managers, at least all of any significant password manager is going to have you choose an account password, or some call it a master password, and they're going to encrypt your information with that. And they will not get that account password. So they can't technically decrypt your data, right? And that tends to be what your data is protected against. And there's one big flaw with that, and that is who chose the account password? The human. right? And so if somebody does get their data, then they're going to start guessing, and they're going to say, okay, let's say it's 1 million people's data, or, we're going to guess somebody used Fluffy Cat. And out of 1 million people, 100 people will have used Fluffy Cat or password 0 or password 123. And we had done some calculations. We'd actually run a contest back a few years ago with hackers where we, put up $30-something thousand as an award. And we said, like, whoever hacks it first, second, and third fastest, gets some of the money and that. And our goal was to see how fast can people crack just fundamental encryption. What we learned from that was, and this was a couple of years ago, so it's probably even less now, they think in dollars of electricity. So it's very similar to crypto mining, right? They're going to go and rent a bunch of compute time. $100 gives you 10 billion guesses.
Wow.
So now you've got to think that account password that you've got, are you protecting $100 worth of stuff with it? Of course you are, right? Do you think they can guess your account password in 10 billion guesses? What about 100 billion guesses for 1,000? Of course, like, I got a pretty complicated one. I'm still like 100 billion guesses is a lot, right? So we said, if somebody ever got a hold of our data, and don't get me wrong, like everybody else, we're going to do everything we can to avoid it. But if they got it, it can't be guessable, which means it can't be human generated, which is really hard because, again, security and convenience. It's easy to do. It's easy to require your account password to be 25 or 30 characters and have 13 numbers, and nobody's going to remember it, right? So what did we do? We said, well, how do we do the convenience versus security side? So we said, what we're going to do is require, like everybody else, people to choose that account password, which we will never get. And then we are going to generate them, what we call the secret key. So if you sign up, you may remember the secret key, which is just, it looks like a license key. It's a bunch of gobbledygook, letters and numbers on there, or maybe, letters and numbers. We will also not get that. So now we have a combination of the two, both which are used in encryption, because it's not good as 2FA is useful, but it's not useful for the purpose of encryption. It doesn't, when you get that 2FA call, if somebody's taking the data, they're not trying to access your server anymore. They're just decrypting. So both are in encryption. And to make it convenient, we store your secret key on your device. We're not trying to hide it, but it's on your device. We never get it. So now for you, all you have to do is enter your account password. It's already got access to your secret key, so that's why you don't have to enter it. And we go from device to device. You may remember you have to QR code it to the next device because that's moving over your secret key. And so that way we've got the security that we need, but the convenience of just the account password like everybody else. And there was two reasons for that. One, we obviously want to protect our customers. Our customers should be demanding that of everyone, right? Anyone you go to, that should be the first thing to demand. Like, prove to me that it's going to be safe. The second thing is, I don't want to be a target. So we put the secret key up on our website. We've put our white paper up publicly on our website. And we're like, this is how we protect our data. And this is what you'll get if you ever take our, because like if somebody is looking at us and going like, oh, like I'm going to do all of this work to try and get their data and it's going to be useless. Like it makes us less of a target. So that was the selfish and non-selfish reason.
I think it's that story is just such a great example of where, as a technology company, you don't need to fight every battle, but you should really choose, you should make strategic decisions where it really matters. I think even the implication of, there's user experience trade-offs and challenges to what you guys did, right? Like in order to go load it up on a new device, you got to get this, this secret key onto the new device. So there's friction there. So I was not in the room, but I'm sure there was a discussion about the user experience friction that was associated with doing this. But there's a first principle decision of, look, this is the right way to do it. If someone's just using Fluffy Cat or password 123 to encrypt their data, that's going to be really bad. This isn't going to end well. I just think it's such a great example of kind of reversing into what's the most important decision. And we don't need to make crazy technical bets on every single part of it. We should choose boring technology for most stuff, but there are places where it's really going to matter. And at some point, you guys should write like a Harvard business case on this or something. I think it's it's a great story.
If I ever get time.
There you go. Shifting gears a second, because we're kind of wrapping up here, getting close to the end. What's your thoughts on what companies should focus on from a cybersecurity perspective over the next few years? Like where you talk to customers, obviously a lot. What are customers concerned about? What are they asking you about?
Yeah, again, I'm sure people will be shocked to hear the word AI come up, but it really is AI, right? There's so much discussion about AI, and companies are trying to understand what are the cybersecurity implications of AI. And if you look at what AI is good at, right? What AI is really good at is contextual, whether it's spoken words, whether it's visual content, whether it's written content. They're good at taking that sort of content and that sort of answers and putting it in context. And that's that I would say is probably the most profound difference that we've seen. And where does that impact people the most, or companies the most? It impacts companies the most with their people. And you think of it today, phishing is just gone ridiculous. I think the government even just issued or the banks or somebody I was reading this morning issued an alert around phishing over the holidays, at least here in Canada. And it's so true. And so if you start to sit there and do that in context, now, you're going to get so in Canada, our equivalent of the IRS is endlessly trying to give me a refund. If only I would follow the link and give my bank account details, they would give me money back. And it's almost laughable, except for, people are falling for it or they wouldn't do it. Imagine when it is, say, my wife or my son who is, FaceTiming me, and it looks like them and it sounds like them and it's talking about things that are similar to them. Humans are going to be fooled some of the time, perhaps not all the time, but it only takes that. And that's what companies are most concerned about, from the advent of AI, is that the traditional ways of protecting your employees are through education. Don't click on links. Don't, follow. If you have something suspicious, reach out to your... It's education. That's not going to be sufficient in a world where context becomes so personal and widely available. So that's where tools will need to be available. And on, not surprisingly, I'm going to talk about one pastor, but that's what we're here for. We're here to help make it easy for people to stay safe, because one password's going to not care that this website looks suspiciously similar to another website. It's not the same from a tool's point of view. It's just going to tell you, oh, it's not the same website. I think that's one of the biggest things that I think people in business are concerned about from a cybersecurity perspective.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. One of the things you mentioned it a few times, but I think just driving it home with the audience, and it's kind of the way that I like to think about cybersecurity as well, is it's at the end of the day, it's a numbers game. It's really like brute force, trying to decrypt data is a numbers game. It's your willingness to do iterations and to pay for those iterations to decrypt something. Phishing will eventually work at scale at some level. And to your point, AI and these LLMs just make it so you can create. I think I wrote a blog post on it. I'll link it in here afterwards, but it just gives you the ability to generate and include more context at scale more efficiently in a very high volume. And I think that, just to your point, it changes the game. It just means that, more context in these things, you're going to see less misspellings. Like the giveaway always on the text message is like a terrible misspelling with terrible grammar and spaces for the LLMs don't make those mistakes. So I think that's it's going to be really interesting just to sort of see the proliferation of how the quality gets better, the ability to include context in some of the attacks gets better. And I do think I agree with you 100%. It's going to have a big impact on the industry. Jeff, it was phenomenal. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, just real quick on that last one. I did actually read a number of articles that say those spelling mistakes and that are on purpose, because with the poor quality, they're actually trying to look for the more gullible people. So who knows?
Interesting.
Maybe we'll see.
That's really interesting. Like get the person who's going to click it anyways. That's really good.
Exactly.
Interesting stuff. Jeff, it was phenomenal having you on. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to this episode dropping, and I'm sure the listeners will love it as well. Thank you for being on.
Thank you. It's been a lot of fun.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for tuning in. This episode of All Aboard is brought to you by the team at Conductor One. We'd love to hear your feedback. Send us a message at allaboard@conductor1.com. Until next time.